Beneath the tarp in the old barn lay not just a car but a mystery, a 1967 Chevrolet Impala, forgotten and rusted. Alex's heart sank as his brother Richard's mocking laughter echoed in his ears. But when Alex uncovered a hidden compartment and found a cryptic letter from their late father, the truth began to unfold. This was not merely an inheritance. It was the key to a legacy far greater than Alex had ever imagined. What secrets lie dormant within this car, and what sacrifices were made to protect them? But before diving into the story, let me know where you're watching this from in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss future stories. The heavy oak doors of the Thompson Estate Library creaked as they swung open, revealing a room steeped in an oppressive weight of history and expectation. Shelves crammed with dust-laden books stretched up to the high ceiling, their faded spines whispering tales of old-world wealth. Sunlight struggled to pierce through the heavy velvet drapes, casting long shadows across the Persian rug. At the center of the room stood a grand mahogany table, its polished surface gleaming under the dim light of an antique chandelier. Alex Thompson sat stiffly on one side of the table, his hands gripping the carved arms of his chair. His heart pounded against his ribs, a rhythm of anxiety he couldn't suppress. Across from him, Richard lounged, with the effortless arrogance that only years of entitlement could cultivate. His perfectly tailored suit and smug demeanor screamed confidence, a sharp contrast to Alex's rumpled shirt and weary expression. Dr. Walker, the family lawyer, shuffled into the room, clutching a thick, leather-bound document. He cleared his throat as he placed the will on the table. His hesitation did not go unnoticed by Alex, who caught the brief flicker of unease in the older man's eyes. Walker adjusted his glasses, avoiding direct eye contact as he began. "This," Walker said, tapping the document, "is your father's final testament." The words hung in the air like an ominous cloud. Alex's stomach churned. Memories of his father flooded his mind, the stern voice lecturing about responsibility, the disapproving glare when Alex made another mistake, the rare, fleeting moments of pride when Alex showed promise in the things that mattered to him, things that had never mattered to Richard. Richard leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a faint smirk. He seemed almost bored, as if the outcome of the will was a foregone conclusion. Alex clenched his fists under the table, trying to ignore his brother's silent gloating. But the tension was unbearable. Walker cleared his throat again, breaking the silence. "To my son, Richard Thompson," he read, "I leave the majority of the estate, including all properties, investments, and shares in the family company." Richard's smirk widened into a grin. He glanced at Alex, his expression dripping with condescension. Alex's heart sank. This was exactly what he'd feared. "And to my son Alexander Thompson," Walker continued, hesitating for a fraction of a second too long, "I leave the contents of the barn." As Richard couldn't contain his laughter. "The barn? Seriously? That decrepit old thing? Oh, this is priceless!" He leaned forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "Well, little brother, I guess Dad thought you'd need a hobby. Maybe fixing up that rust bucket will keep you out of trouble." Alex's face flushed with humiliation and anger. He could feel the weight of Richard's words pressing down on him, a suffocating reminder of how little their father had thought of him. But it wasn't just the humiliation, it was the betrayal. The barn? After years of trying, failing, and trying again to earn his father's approval, this was all he was worth? "Enough," Alex snapped, his voice cutting through Richard's laughter like a blade. He slammed his fist on the table, the sharp sound echoing through the library. "You think this makes you better than me? You think a pile of money and some shares will make you a better man?" Richard raised an eyebrow, unbothered by Alex's outburst. "Relax, Alex, it's not my fault Dad saw you for what you really are. A failure." The words hit their mark and Alex felt a surge of rage rising within him, but instead of lashing out again, he pushed his chair back and stood, his jaw clenched. He turned to Walker, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Is that all?" Alex asked, his voice trembling with controlled anger. Walker hesitated before nodding. Yes, Alex, that's all." Without another word, Alex stormed out of the room. His footsteps echoed in the silent halls of the estate, each one fueled by a mix of anger, humiliation, and something else, determination. Richard's laughter followed him, fading as Alex made his way toward the front door. Outside, the late afternoon sun was blinding, a stark contrast to the gloom of the library. Alex took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His father's voice echoed in his mind, as sharp and judgmental as it had always been. "Responsibility isn't given, Alex. It's earned." Alex clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. "Fine," he muttered under his breath. "If this is what you think of me, Dad, I'll prove you wrong. I don't need your estate. I don't need Richard's pity. I'll make something out of this, even if it kills me." With a final glance back at the towering estate, Alex walked toward his car. His mind was already racing, not with plans, but with a single question that gnawed at him. Why the barn? The barn loomed in the distance, barely visible under the silver light of the moon. Alex stood at its threshold, lantern in hand, hesitating. The wood creaked ominously in the cool night breeze, and the faint smell of mildew wafted out, mingled with the earthy scent of decaying leaves. Cobwebs hung like forgotten memories from the beams, swaying gently as though they whispered secrets of years long past. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "What a fitting symbol for what Dad thought of me," he muttered. "Forgotten and decaying." The bitterness in his voice surprised even himself, but he couldn't deny how appropriate it felt. The barn had always been a place of mystery in his childhood, off limits, according to his father, who insisted it was dangerous, filled with rusted tools and nests of snakes. Alex stepped inside, the lantern casting jittery, uneven light on the barn's interior. The shadows danced across the walls, revealing a neglected space that seemed to groan under the weight of disuse. The floorboards creaked with every step he took, and a faint rustling in the corner made him freeze, heart pounding. His mind immediately flashed back to the stern warnings of his youth, but he forced himself to press on, swallowing his unease. In the center of the barn, partially hidden under a heavy tarp, sat a hulking mass that must have been the inheritance his father left him. He felt a surge of resentment flare up again as he approached it. "This is it?" he thought. "This is what I'm worth?" He grabbed the edge of the tarp, hesitating as doubts gnawed at him. What could possibly be under here that mattered? Was this just another reminder of his father's endless judgment? Taking a deep breath, Alex yanked the tarp off in one swift motion. Beneath it sat a 1967 Chevrolet Impala, its once sleek body dulled by layers of grime and dust. The chrome accents were tarnished, and rust spotted the edges like a disease. Alex stared at it, bewildered. His father had never spoken much about cars, and this one, sitting here forgotten, seemed almost out of place. "What is this supposed to mean?" he muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. His fingers brushed the cool metal of the car's hood, and for a moment he thought he felt something. A strange pull, a connection he couldn't quite explain. "Beautiful, isn't she?" The voice startled Alex so much that he nearly dropped the lantern. He spun around, his heart racing to see Maria standing in the doorway. Her silhouette was backlit by the moon, giving her an almost spectral appearance. She stepped into the barn, her gaze fixed on the Impala. "What are you doing here?" Alex demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. Maria didn't answer right away. She moved closer, her steps measured, and placed a hand on the car with a familiarity that struck Alex as odd. "Your father always said this car carried our family's soul," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Maybe it's time you find out why." Alex snorted, crossing his arms. "The soul of a family that doesn't care about me? Thanks, but no thanks." His words were laced with bitterness, but Maria didn't flinch. She turned to him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Your father had his reasons," she said cryptically, her gaze steady. "This car is more than just metal and wheels, Alex. It's a piece of who you are. You might not see it now, but you will." Alex opened his mouth to retort, to ask her what she meant, but the words caught in his throat. There was something in her tone, an insistence that he couldn't brush off. For a moment, they stood in silence. The only sound, the faint creak of the barn settling around them. "Why didn't he just tell me then?" Alex finally said, his voice quieter now, almost defeated. "Why all the games, the secrecy? If this car's so important, why didn't he ever say anything?" Maria smiled faintly, a flicker of sadness in her expression. "Maybe he thought you weren't ready to hear it, or maybe he thought you'd find your way here on your own." She turned to leave, pausing at the doorway to look back at him. "But you're here now, Alex. That's what matters." As her footsteps faded into the night, Alex was left alone with the Impala. He stared at it, the lantern's light reflecting off the faded paint, and for the first time, he felt something other than resentment. Curiosity. What did his father mean by calling this car the soul of the family? And why did Maria seem to know more about it than he did? He sighed, brushing the dust off the hood. "Guess it's just you and me now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but even as the words left his mouth, a spark of determination began to take hold. If his father thought this car was important enough to leave as his only inheritance, maybe, just maybe, there was something here worth uncovering. The flickering lantern cast long shadows as Alex sat on the edge of the car, lost in thought. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hint of something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The faint hum of city traffic seeped through the cracked window of Alex's cramped apartment. The dim glow of a single desk lamp illuminated the cluttered space, highlighting peeling wallpaper and a few sparse pieces of furniture. On the wall above his desk hung one lone photograph, framed but slightly tilted. Alex as a 10-year-old, beaming beside his father, Donald, at a car show. They were standing next to a gleaming Corvette, Donald's arm draped protectively over his son's shoulder. Alex sat on the edge of his worn-out couch, the car keys resting in his palm like a taunt. He turned them over slowly, the metal cool against his fingers. His gaze drifted to the photo, and an ache welled up in his chest. "Dad gave up on me a long time ago," he muttered, the words heavy with self-reproach. "Why didn't I try harder to prove him wrong?" The weight of the past few days bore down on him. The will reading, Richard's smug laughter, and the cryptic words from Maria swirled in his mind like an unrelenting storm. The Impala sat waiting in the barn, its secrets locked away. But the thought of confronting them felt like another test. He was doomed to fail. A knock at the door snapped him out of his spiral. Before he could respond, it swung open and Luke stepped in, grinning as always. Behind him, Emma followed, her arms full of takeout bags. "Brought dinner," Emma announced, dropping the bags onto the kitchen counter. "And no, you don't get a choice. You're eating. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in days." "Not now, guys," Alex grumbled, standing to push the door closed. "I'm not really in the mood for company." "That's exactly why we're here," Luke countered, plopping down on the couch and stretching out. "You think you can wallow in self-pity all alone? Sorry, not happening." Emma busied herself unpacking the food, while Luke tossed a soda can at Alex, forcing him to catch it. "Come on," Luke said, leaning forward. "Talk to us. What's going on?" Alex sighed, sinking back into the couch. He held up the car keys. "This," he said, shaking them slightly. "My great inheritance. A rusted pile of junk my dad thought was worth leaving me, instead of anything that mattered." Luke exchanged a glance with Emma, then leaned closer. "You're looking at this all wrong," he said. "That car isn't just a pile of junk, it's an opportunity." "Opportunity?" Alex scoffed. "For what? To embarrass myself further? To remind everyone, including Richard, why Dad always thought I wasn't good enough?" "Stop it, Alex," Emma cut in, her tone firm. She walked over and sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "This isn't about Richard, and it's not even about your dad. This is about you." Alex looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Emma gestured to the car keys. This car isn't just something your dad left you. It's a chance for you to prove to yourself what you're capable of, to show that you're not the person you think your dad saw. Luke chimed in, his voice lighter but no less serious. You remember that soapbox car we built when we were kids? Everyone said we couldn't do it because we didn't have the right tools or parts, but you figured out how to make it work with scraps from your dad's garage. You didn't just build that car, you won the race with it. That was different, Alex muttered, though the memory stirred something deep inside him. That was just a kid's project. It wasn't just a project, Luke countered. It was the same thing. This is a challenge. And you don't back down from challenges, Alex. You never have. Emma nodded, her expression softening. Luke's right. This isn't about fixing a car. It's about believing in yourself. You've been carrying this idea that your dad didn't think you were good enough, but maybe this car is his way of telling you otherwise. Maybe he wanted you to fight for it, to see your own worth. Alex's eyes dropped to the keys again, his fingers tightening around them. Their words resonated, cutting through the haze of doubt and bitterness that had clouded his mind. He thought about the Impala, sitting in the barn, waiting. For what? He wasn't sure. But suddenly, the idea of leaving it there to rust felt wrong. Do you really think I can do this? He asked, his voice quiet but laced with the faintest hint of hope. We know you can, Luke said, clapping him on the shoulder. You just have to believe it too. A silence fell over the room, but it wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of before. It was the quiet of possibility, of something shifting inside Alex. He took a deep breath, then stood, the car keys dangling from his hand. If Dad wanted me to fight for this, Alex said, his voice steady now, then I'll fight. Let's restore that car. Luke and Emma grinned as Alex's determination solidified before their eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. For the first time in years, Alex felt a spark of purpose ignite within him. And this time, he wasn't going to let it go out. The barn had transformed. Gone were the cobwebs and overwhelming stench of mildew. In their place were workbenches scattered with tools, neatly organized by Emma's insistence, and bright floodlights that Luke had rigged up to banish the shadows. The Impala stood in the center, its hood open like a patient on an operating table, as Alex worked methodically on its restoration. The rhythmic sound of tools against metal filled the air, broken occasionally by Luke's jokes, and Emma's reminders to take breaks. Alex wiped the sweat from his brow, squinting at the rusted panel he'd been struggling to remove for the past hour. It was stubborn, clinging to the car as if guarding some ancient secret. He adjusted his grip on the wrench, his frustration mounting. This thing's not budging, Alex muttered, glancing at Luke. You sure you can't lend me some of that muscle? Luke grinned from his perch on a nearby stool. Hey, I'm the brains of this operation, remember? You've got this. Rolling his eyes, Alex turned back to the panel. With one final heave, the wrench slipped, sending his hand scraping against a jagged edge of metal. He hissed in pain, pulling his hand back to reveal a deep cut on his palm. Blood welled up instantly, dripping onto the panel he'd been wrestling with. Alex, Emma was at his side in seconds, already reaching for the first aid kit they kept nearby. Hold still, let me clean that. It's fine, Alex said, wincing as she dabbed at the cut. Just a scratch. But as he turned his hand back toward the panel, something caught his eye. Where the blood had fallen, a faint glint of metal gleamed through the grime. Frowning, he leaned closer, running his uninjured fingers over the surface. Beneath the layer of rust and dirt, he felt the outline of a small latch. There's something here, he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hammering of his heart. Emma leaned in beside him, her eyes narrowing. Wait, there's something under here. Luke was already moving, grabbing a flathead screwdriver from the workbench. Let's see what we've got, he said, kneeling beside Alex. Together, they pried at the latch, the metal creaking as it gave way. With a final, sharp pop, the panel swung open, revealing a hidden compartment. The three of them stared in stunned silence. Inside, wrapped in an old cloth, was a small stack of papers. Alex reached in hesitantly, his fingers trembling as he unfolded the first sheet. It was a letter, yellowed with age, but the handwriting was unmistakable. "It's from my dad," Alex whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Emma and Luke exchanged a glance but said nothing, giving Alex space to process. He cleared his throat and began to read aloud, his voice wavering as the words unfolded before him. "Alex," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means you found the first step in a journey I never had the courage to take myself. This car isn't just a test. It's a key to something far greater and far more dangerous than you realize. Be careful whom you trust." Alex paused, his hands tightening around the paper. His eyes flicked up to Emma and Luke, who were watching him intently. Swallowing hard, he continued, "Your mother and I knew we couldn't keep you safe forever. This car represents our legacy, but it's also a target. There are people who will stop at nothing to claim what's hidden within. If you've come this far, Alex, it means you have the strength to finish what we started. But you'll have to make choices, and those choices will define not just your future, but the future of something far bigger than our family." As Alex finished, the barn seemed to hold its breath. He lowered the letter slowly, his gaze fixed on the Impala. The car, once just a rusted relic, now felt like something alive, something with purpose. But the weight of his father's words pressed down on him, filling him with equal parts anger and confusion. "Dangerous," Alex said, his voice rising. "What was Dad hiding from us? Why couldn't he just tell me this while he was alive? Why leave it buried in some secret compartment?" Emma reached out, placing a steadying hand on his arm. "Maybe he thought you weren't ready then," she said gently. "Or maybe he thought this was the only way to make sure you found it when the time was right." Luke, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, leaned back against the workbench, his expression serious. "Alex, whatever this is, it's bigger than just you or your dad. That much is clear. But the question is, what are you going to do about it?" For a long moment, Alex didn't respond. He stared at the letter, his father's words echoing in his mind. "Be careful whom you trust." The warning felt like a shadow over everything, a reminder that the stakes were higher than he'd ever imagined. Finally, he folded the letter carefully, tucking it back into the compartment. When he stood, there was a new resolve in his eyes, a determination that hadn't been there before. "We finish restoring the car," Alex said firmly. "Whatever my dad was protecting, whatever this is about, it's time to find out." Emma and Luke nodded, their expressions mirroring his determination. The three of them turned back to the Impala, the car now more than just a project. It was a mystery, a challenge, and perhaps even a legacy waiting to be uncovered. Outside, the wind howled against the barn, as if urging them forward. Inside, under the glow of the floodlights, Alex gripped his wrench again, his movements deliberate. The journey was only just beginning. The Thompson estate was ablaze with light, its grand halls filled with the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. The gala was in full swing, attended by the city's elite, business magnates, influential politicians, and society's most glamorous faces. Beneath the glittering chandeliers, guests mingled, their laughter and chatter blending with the strains of a live string quartet. Alex entered the room with Emma and Luke by his side, his posture tense but resolute. He adjusted his tie, an awkward accessory he rarely wore, and scanned the crowd. His eyes locked on Richard, who stood at the center of a circle of guests, exuding confidence as always. "Here we go," Luke muttered under his breath. "Brace yourself." As they moved through the crowd, Alex felt the weight of judgmental gazes. People whispered as they passed, no doubt speculating about why Alex had even bothered to show up. But Alex kept his head high, determined to hold his ground. Richard's laughter rang out, cutting through the hum of conversation. "Ah, there's my little brother," he said loudly, drawing the attention of the entire group. His grin widened as Alex approached. "Alex, what a surprise. I didn't think you'd have time to leave the barn." Still trying to fix that pile of junk?" The guests chuckled politely, though a few exchanged uncomfortable glances. Alex stopped a few feet away, meeting Richard's smug gaze with calm defiance. "Yes, I am," Alex said evenly. "And when I'm done, that pile of junk will be worth more than anything in this house." Richard raised an eyebrow, feigning amusement. "Ambitious as always, aren't you? Let's toast to that, everyone." He lifted his glass, his voice dripping with mockery. "To ambition! May it take my brother as far as his rusted relic can roll." The laughter that followed felt like a slap, but Alex didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, his tone cool and measured. "Let's see who's laughing when that car outruns your fancy estate." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure of whether to laugh or intervene. Richard's smile faltered for a split second before he recovered, his eyes narrowing. "You've always been delusional, Alex," Richard said, his voice low enough to reach only Alex and those closest to him, "dreaming of things you'll never achieve. You think fixing a car is going to change anything?" Alex took a step closer, his voice quiet but firm. Richard's face darkened, his composure slipping. "You're out of your mind," he snarled, his voice rising. "Stay out of my way, Alex. You have no idea what you're getting into." "Maybe I don't," Alex shot back, his voice calm but cutting. "But at least I'm willing to find out. Can you say the same?" The two brothers stared each other down, the air between them electric with unspoken history and resentment. Around them, the crowd began to disperse, sensing the intensity of the confrontation. Emma and Luke hovered nearby, ready to step in if things escalated further. Richard finally broke the silence, stepping back and straightening his jacket. "You're going to regret this," he said coldly, before turning on his heel and disappearing into the crowd. Alex exhaled, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He felt Emma's hand on his arm, a grounding presence that steadied him. "You handled that well," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet encouragement. "You didn't let him get to you." Luke nodded, his expression a mix of pride and amusement. "You even got the last word." "That's a first." Alex managed a small smile, but the encounter left a bitter taste in his mouth. As much as he wanted to shake it off, Richard's parting words lingered. He wasn't just a rival. He was an obstacle, one Alex would have to confront again if he wanted to finish what his father had started. "Wow, let's get out of here," Alex said, his voice firm. "We've got work to do." As they made their way toward the exit, Alex couldn't help but glance back at the glittering crowd. For all the luxury and power on display, it felt hollow compared to the determination that now fueled him. The Impala wasn't just a car. It was his chance to prove everyone wrong, to carve out his own place in a world that had always seemed out of reach. Outside, the cool night air hit him like a wake-up call. Alex took a deep breath, the tension of the gallows slowly fading. Emma and Luke flanked him, their presence a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. "Next time," Luke said with a grin, "we'll bring the Impala and park it right out front." Alex chuckled, the weight on his shoulders feeling just a little lighter. "Next time," he agreed, "and maybe then Richard will finally learn what ambition really looks like." As they drove away from the estate, the lights of the gala fading into the distance, Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. The conflict with Richard wasn't over, but for the first time, Alex felt ready to face whatever came next. His journey was just beginning, and he wouldn't let anything stand in his way. The barn groaned under the weight of the storm raging outside. Rain pounded against the roof in relentless waves, and the wind howled through the cracks in the old wooden walls. Inside, the Impala gleamed under the flickering light of a work lamp, its half-restrained body standing as a testament to Alex's determination. Thunder rumbled overhead, each crash reverberating through the barn like a warning. Alex stood by the car, wiping grease from his hands. Luke and Emma were nearby, sorting tools and handing him parts as needed. The storm outside mirrored Alex's inner turmoil. The discovery of his father's letter had unsettled him more than he wanted to admit, and the cryptic warning about the car's significance weighed heavily on his mind. "I can't believe this storm came out of nowhere," Emma said, glancing at the barn's rattling windows. "It's like something out of a horror movie." Luke chuckled, rummaging through a box of spare parts. "Well, if this is a horror movie, Alex is the guy who's about to uncover the creepy secret." Alex shook his head, forcing a smile. "Let's just hope it doesn't come with ghosts." As the lightning flashed, illuminating the barn in stark white light, Luke froze, his eyes narrowing. "Wait a second," he said, stepping closer to the car. "What's that?" Alex turned, following Luke's gaze to the Impala's exposed engine. Luke reached out, brushing his hand over a bundle of wires tucked behind the carburetor. This doesn't belong here," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "It's too advanced. This isn't something you'd find in a car from the 60s. Alex frowned, stepping closer. "What do you mean?" Luke grabbed a flashlight and directed its beam onto the wires, revealing intricate circuits and components that looked completely out of place. "I mean, this is something else. It's way too sophisticated for a car from this era. It almost looks like, I don't know, military-grade tech or something." Emma moved to Alex's side, her eyes widening as she studied the strange wiring. "What if," she began, her voice hesitant, "what if this is part of your parents' work?" The room seemed to hold its breath as her words sank in. Alex stared at the wires, his mind racing. His father had never talked about his work in detail, and his mother's sudden death had left many questions unanswered. Could this really be connected to them? "That doesn't make sense," Alex said, his voice wavering. "If this was part of their work, why hide it in a car? And why not tell me?" Emma placed a hand on his arm, her gaze steady. "Maybe they were trying to protect you. Whatever this is, Alex, it's clearly not ordinary. Your dad's letter said this car was important. Maybe this is why." Alex looked back at the engine, his chest tightening. The implications were overwhelming. If his parents had been working on something so advanced, something dangerous enough to warrant secrecy, what did it mean for him now? He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "If Dad knew all this," he muttered, more to himself than to the others, "why didn't he tell me? What else is he hiding?" Thunder crashed again, louder this time, shaking the barn. The light flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Alex felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the storm outside, a mirror of the storm inside his mind. Luke broke the silence, his voice softer now. "Whatever this is, Alex, we need to figure it out. But we can't do it here. Not without the right tools." Alex nodded slowly, his jaw tightening with resolve. "We'll take the engine apart, piece by piece. If there's more of this, whatever it is, we'll find it." Emma nodded, her expression serious. "But we have to be careful. If your dad thought this was dangerous enough to keep hidden, he must have had a good reason." For a moment, none of them spoke. The storm outside continued to rage, lightning flashing in jagged bursts across the sky. Alex stared at the Impala, his father's words echoing in his mind. "This car isn't just a test. It's a key to something far greater and far more dangerous than you realize." Finally, Alex spoke, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "We keep going. Whatever this is, I need to know the truth." Luke and Emma exchanged a glance, then nodded. Together, the three of them returned to the car, their movements purposeful despite the storm outside. The Impala, once just a symbol of his father's perceived neglect, now held the key to a mystery that spanned years, perhaps even decades. As they worked, the storm seemed to intensify, as though the universe itself was pushing them forward. Alex didn't know what they would find, but he knew one thing for certain: this was no ordinary car. And whatever his parents had been hiding, it was about to change everything. The barn, now half restored, was bathed in the golden glow of evening light filtering through the gaps in the walls. Tools lay scattered across workbenches, evidence of the hours Alex, Luke, and Emma had spent on the Impala. The car itself gleamed under a layer of fresh primer, its transformation a testament to Alex's resolve. The strange wiring they'd uncovered remained a mystery, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that answers were coming, and fast. He was tightening a bolt under the hood when Emma's voice cut through the stillness. "Alex, someone's coming." Straightening, Alex wiped his hands on a rag and exchanged a look with Luke. Outside, the crunch of tires on gravel grew louder, and soon a sleek black SUV rolled into view, stopping just outside the barn. The doors opened, and Richard stepped out first, his confident stride as infuriating as ever. Behind him, a tall man in a dark suit emerged, flanked by two imposing figures who could only be described as henchmen. "Walker," Alex muttered under his breath, recognizing the man from the few times he'd seen him at family events. He'd always seemed like a shadow in the background, unassuming, but with an unsettling air of control. "Evening, Alex," Richard called out, his tone mocking. "Working late on your little project?" Walker stepped forward, his sharp gaze locking onto Alex. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but laced with authority. "It's about your parents." Alex's stomach churned, but he didn't flinch. "You've had years to talk," he said, crossing his arms. "Why now?" Walker approached slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Because the time has come for you to understand the truth," he said. "Your parents, they entrusted me with something very important, something I've protected for years." Emma and Luke moved closer to Alex, their presence reassuring. "Protected?" Alex echoed, his tone incredulous. "From what? And why didn't they ever mention you?" Walker sighed, as if disappointed by Alex's skepticism. "Because they wanted to keep you safe," he said. "Your father, especially. He knew the risks of their work, the dangers it posed. That's why he hid the energy converter in the Impala." The mention of the converter sent a ripple of tension through the barn. Alex clenched his fists, his pulse quickening. "And now you want it?" he asked, his voice rising. "What makes you think I'd just hand it over to you?" Walker's expression hardened. "Because your parents trusted me," he said firmly. "They knew what was at stake. That device is more than a piece of technology. It's a breakthrough that could change the world, but in the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic." "Catastrophic?" Alex scoffed. "You mean like letting someone like you have it? You've done nothing but manipulate us." Richard stepped in, smirking. "Come on, Alex. Be reasonable. Walker's the only one who can handle this properly. Do you really think you're qualified to deal with something this big?" Alex turned on his brother, his anger boiling over. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about qualifications. This is about doing what's right. And you wouldn't know the first thing about that." Walker raised a hand, silencing Richard before he could respond. "Alex," he said, his tone measured, "I'm offering you a chance to protect your parents' legacy, to ensure their work doesn't fall into the wrong hands." Alex stepped closer, his voice low but filled with conviction. "You don't get it either. This isn't your decision to make. My parents trusted me with this car, with whatever they were working on, and I'm not about to let you, or anyone else, take that away." The tension snapped like a rubber band. Walker's calm demeanor vanished, replaced by a sharp command. "Take it." The henchman moved toward the Impala, but Alex was faster. He lunged forward, grabbing a nearby wrench and swinging it to block their approach. Luke joined the fray, shoving one of the men away from the car. The barn erupted into chaos, the sounds of grunts and crashing tools filling the air. Emma yelled from the corner, grabbing a crowbar and thrusting it toward Alex. "Here!" Walker stood back, watching with cold detachment as his men struggled to subdue Alex and Luke. "Don't damage the car," he warned, his voice cutting through the noise. Alex ducked a punch, adrenaline surging as he swung the crowbar, narrowly missing one of the henchmen. "Stay away from it!" he shouted. But the scuffle took a toll. One of the men shoved Luke hard against a workbench, sending him crashing to the ground. Emma rushed to his side, her voice frantic. "Luke, are you okay?" Clutching his side, Luke grimaced, but nodded. "I'm fine, don't let them take it." The second henchman reached for the Impala's hood, but Alex threw himself between them, his body a barrier of pure defiance. "Over my dead body!" he growled. For a moment it seemed like the henchman might overpower him, but the sound of distant sirens suddenly pierced the night. Walker stiffened, signaling his men to retreat. "This isn't over," Walker said, his voice cold and measured. "You've made a mistake, Alex. A mistake you'll regret." As the SUV sped away, Alex slumped against the Impala, his chest heaving. Emma helped Luke to his feet, her eyes filled with worry. The barn was a mess, tools scattered and shelves overturned, but the Impala remained untouched. "We need a plan," Luke said, his voice strained but steady, "because they're coming back." Alex nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then we'll be ready." The storm had passed, but the battle was far from over. As Alex looked at the Impala, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about protecting a legacy anymore. It was about survival, and he was willing to fight for it. The moon hung low over the winding rural roads, its silver light barely illuminating the path ahead. Alex's knuckles whitened as he gripped the Impala's steering wheel, the roar of the engine drowning out the thundering pulse in his ears. Behind them, the headlights of Walker's SUV and his henchman's sleek black cars loomed like predators in the night, closing in with every second. In the passenger seat, Emma braced herself, one hand gripping the dashboard. In the back, Luke was hunched over a small metal box, his tools scattered around him as he worked frantically. "They're gaining on us!" Emma shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Alex glanced in the rearview mirror, his jaw clenched. "Not for long," he said, shifting gears. The Impala surged forward with a burst of speed that seemed impossible for a car of its age. The engine roared like a beast unleashed, the tires squealing as Alex swerved around a sharp bend. "Hold on," Alex yelled as the car rocketed down a narrow stretch of road. "This isn't just a car, it's a rocket!" Emma's eyes widened as the Impala's speedometer climbed higher than it ever should have. "What the hell did your dad put in this thing?" "Something that's about to save our lives," Alex replied, his voice tight with focus. The cars behind them were relentless, their high-tech designs allowing them to take corners with ease. Walker's henchmen weren't holding back, their aggressive maneuvers forcing Alex to push the Impala harder, but every time they drew close, the Impala seemed to respond, its engine humming with an otherworldly power that defied logic. In the back seat, Luke swore under his breath as he fumbled with wires and circuits. "If I can just get this to work," he muttered, his fingers flying over the makeshift device he'd cobbled together. "Look, whatever you're doing, do it faster," Emma called over her shoulder, her voice tinged with panic. Alex glanced in the mirror again. One of the SUVs had pulled alongside them, its passenger rolling down a window to reveal a man aiming what looked like a grappling gun. "They're trying to disable us," Alex barked, swerving violently to avoid the shot. The grapple missed, embedding itself in a tree instead. We're not gonna make it like this," Luke said, sweat dripping down his forehead. "I need 30 more seconds." "We don't have 30 seconds," Emma shot back, ducking as another SUV pulled up on her side, its tires dangerously close to the Impala's. "Alex, do something!" Alex's mind raced as he spotted a narrow dirt road veering off to the right. Without hesitation, he yanked the wheel, sending the Impala skidding onto the rough terrain. The car bounced and jolted over the uneven ground, but it held firm, its mysterious enhancements absorbing the impact with ease. Behind them, one of the pursuing SUVs struggled to follow, its sleek tires slipping on the loose gravel. The second SUV managed to stay close, its headlights glaring like twin suns in the darkness. "Got it," Luke suddenly shouted, holding up a small, hastily constructed device. "This should disable their electronics. Temporarily." "Do it!" Alex shouted, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. Luke leaned out of the back window, aiming the device at the closest SUV. With a flick of a switch, a bright blue spark erupted from the contraption, arcing through the air like lightning. The SUV's headlights flickered, then died completely as its engine sputtered to a halt. The vehicle swerved wildly before skidding to a stop, its driver frantically pounding on the dashboard. "Yes!" Luke cheered, pulling himself back inside the car. "One down," Emma said, a note of relief in her voice. "But we've still got the others." The remaining SUV was relentless, its driver clearly skilled as it navigated the rough terrain with unnerving precision. Alex gritted his teeth, pushing the Impala even harder. The car seemed to respond to his determination, its speed and agility defying reason. "We're running out of road," Emma warned, pointing ahead to where the dirt path narrowed into a bridge spanning a rushing river. "Then we'll make our own road," Alex said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He slammed the accelerator to the floor, the Impala surging forward with a deafening roar. The SUV behind them tried to keep up, but as Alex reached the bridge, he yanked the wheel hard to the left, sending the Impala skidding off the path and onto the rocky terrain beside the river. The move caught their pursuers off guard, and the SUV hesitated just long enough for Alex to gain critical distance. As the Impala climbed back onto a main road, Alex let out a shaky breath. The pursuing cars were nowhere in sight, their headlights swallowed by the darkness behind them. "Did we lose them?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "For now," Alex said, his grip on the wheel relaxing slightly. "But they'll be back." Luke slumped in the back seat, his makeshift device resting in his lap. "That was too close," he muttered, wiping his face. "Next time I'm building something with more range." Emma turned to Alex, her eyes searching his. "What now?" Alex glanced at the Impala's dashboard, the faint glow of the mysterious wiring pulsing like a heartbeat. "Now," he said, determination hardening his voice, "we figure out what this car is really capable of, and make sure they never get their hands on it." The Impala roared down the empty road, its occupants bracing for the battles yet to come. The storm had passed, but the fight was far from over. The hidden cabin was nestled deep in the woods, far from prying eyes and the chaos Alex had narrowly escaped. The Impala rested outside, its engine quiet but still emanating a strange hum, as if it shared Alex's anticipation. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The cabin was unlike anything Alex had expected, filled with sleek monitors, intricate wiring, and advanced equipment that hummed softly, glowing faintly in the dim light. Emma and Luke stood behind Alex, their faces illuminated by the bluish glow of a central console. Across the room, Richard leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. And at the heart of it all, an older man sat in a worn leather chair, his presence commanding despite the frailty in his posture. "Dr. Sullivan," Alex said, his voice tinged with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, "you're the one who sent the coordinates." The doctor nodded, his eyes sharp despite the wrinkles that lined his face. "I've been waiting for this moment, Alex. Your parents, they trusted me to make sure you'd find the truth when the time was right." Alex exchanged a glance with Emma and Luke before stepping forward. "The truth about what? Why all the secrecy? Why the Impala?" Dr. Sullivan gestured to a nearby console where a series of files were displayed on the screen. "The answers are all here," he said, "but there's something you need to see first." He tapped a button, and the screen flickered, revealing a video log. The image was grainy but clear enough to make Alex's breath catch. On the screen stood his biological parents, Charles and Margaret, their expressions somber, yet resolute. "Alex," Charles began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "if you're watching this, it means we couldn't protect you the way we hoped. It means you found the Impala, and with it, the legacy we left behind." Margaret stepped closer, her hand resting on Charles's arm. "They never wanted you to bear this burden," she said softly. "But the energy converter, it's too powerful to fall into the wrong hands. Global Energy has been after it for years. They know its potential, and they'll stop at nothing to control it." Charles nodded, his jaw tightening. "That's why we hid it, why we gave you up. To keep you safe. We knew if they ever found out about you, they'd use you against us. We couldn't let that happen." Alex felt his knees weaken, and he gripped the edge of the console for support. The weight of their words pressed down on him, the sacrifices they had made suddenly stark and undeniable. Margaret's voice broke through his haze. "Alex, we know this is a lot to ask, but you're the only one who can finish what we started. Protect the converter. Don't let it fall into their hands." The screen went dark, leaving the room in silence. Alex stared at the blank monitor, his mind racing. For years, he had believed his parents had abandoned him. Now he understood the truth. They had given everything to ensure his safety, even if it meant never seeing him again. Dr. Sullivan's voice broke the silence. "Your parents weren't just scientists," he said. "They were visionaries. The energy converter could revolutionize the world. Clean energy, limitless possibilities. But in the wrong hands, it could be weaponized, used to control entire nations." Emma stepped forward, placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. "Alex, this isn't just about your parents anymore. It's about what their work represents." Luke nodded, his voice steady. "And what you're going to do about it." Alex took a deep breath, his gaze shifting to the Impala through the cabin's window. The car, once just a symbol of his father's neglect, was now something far greater. It was a vessel of hope, a testament to the sacrifices made by both his biological and adoptive parents. Finally, he turned to face the group, his expression hardened with determination. "If they gave everything for this," he said, his voice unwavering, "then so will I." Richard, who had been silent until now, pushed off the wall and approached Alex. "You're serious about this," he said, his tone lacking its usual condescension. "Dead serious," Alex replied, meeting his brother's gaze. "This isn't just about family anymore. It's about doing what's right." For a moment, Richard hesitated, his facade cracking. Then he nodded, stepping back. "Then I'm in," he said quietly. "If we're doing this, we're doing it together." Dr. Sullivan moved to another console, bringing up schematics of the energy converter and its integration into the Impala. "We don't have much time," he said. "Walker and his people won't stop until they find you. If you're going to protect this, you'll need to be ready." Alex nodded, his resolve solidifying with every passing second. He looked around the room, at Emma's unwavering support, Luke's resourcefulness, Richard's unexpected allegiance, and the legacy left behind by his parents. For the first time, he felt a sense of clarity, a purpose that was bigger than himself. "Let's get to work," Alex said, his voice steady and resolute. "We've got a world to change." The cabin buzzed with renewed energy as the group began preparing for the challenges ahead. Outside, the Impala sat waiting, its engine quiet but alive with potential, ready to carry them into the next chapter of their fight. The city square buzzed with anticipation. A massive stage had been erected in front of the central fountain, flanked by towering screens broadcasting the event live to the gathered crowd. Reporters jostled for position, cameras trained on the podium where Alex was set to speak. Behind him, the Impala gleamed under the bright lights, its restored frame a symbol of resilience and innovation. The air was electric, charged with the promise of revelation. Alex stood at the edge of the stage, his heart pounding as he scanned the sea of faces. Emma and Luke were nearby, their supportive presence a steadying force. Richard lingered at the back, his expression unreadable. Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself. This was the moment they had worked toward, the culmination of his parents' sacrifices and his own fight to protect their legacy. As Alex stepped up to the podium, the crowd hushed, cameras zooming in. He adjusted the microphone, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Oh, thank you all for being here today," he began. "What you're about to see isn't just an invention, it's a breakthrough. A chance to change the way we power our world, to break free from the chains of fossil fuels and corruption." He gestured toward the Impala. "This car isn't just a machine. It's a symbol of what's possible when innovation and integrity come together. My parents dedicated their lives to creating something that could transform the future. Today, I'm here to honor their vision." The crowd murmured, a wave of curiosity and excitement rippling through them. But before Alex could continue, the air shifted. Walker appeared from the edge of the stage, flanked by Jason Roberts, the CEO of Global Energy. Their presence sent a chill through Alex and he instinctively stepped back, his eyes narrowing. Walker smiled, a calculated expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, stepping up to the microphone, "what Alex has failed to mention is that this invention isn't his alone. It belongs to Global Energy, an organization with the resources and expertise to ensure its safe deployment." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alex's fists clenched at his sides. "Walker," he said, his voice low but laced with fury, "what are you doing?" Walker turned to him, his smile now a sneer. "Did you really think I'd risk everything for sentimentality, Alex? This is bigger than you, bigger than your parents' little dream." Beside him, Roberts nodded, stepping forward. "This technology has incredible potential," he said, his voice slick with corporate polish, "and with Global Energy, we can ensure it's used responsibly." "You mean profitably?" Alex shot back, his voice rising. "You don't care about responsibility, you only care about control." The crowd murmured again, their uncertainty growing. Alex scanned the faces, searching for a way to regain their trust. Before he could speak, Richard's voice cut through the tension. "Enough lies!" he shouted, stepping forward. The crowd turned to him, surprised. Richard looked directly at Walker and Roberts, his expression hardened with resolve. "This invention belongs to Alex and the world. It doesn't need your greed tainting it." Walker's smirk faltered and Roberts stiffened. "Richard, don't be foolish," Walker said, his tone warning. But Richard ignored him, turning to the crowd. "My father might have thought I was the heir to his legacy, but he was wrong. Alex has worked harder, fought harder, and sacrificed more than anyone here. This is his moment, and I won't let you take it from him." The crowd erupted into cheers, the tide of opinion shifting. Alex stared at his brother, stunned. For the first time, he saw not the smug rival he had grown up resenting, but a man willing to stand by his side. Walker's calm veneer cracked. "This isn't over," he snarled. He reached for his phone, likely to summon reinforcements, but before he could act, the massive screens behind Alex flickered to life. Emma grinned from her position at the tech console. "You wanted to broadcast something? Let's broadcast the truth." The screens displayed detailed schematics of the energy converter, alongside a video from Alex's parents explaining its purpose and the dangers of monopolizing it. The crowd watched in rapt silence as the truth unfolded before them. Roberts's face turned ashen. "Shut it down," he barked. But it was too late. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, their enthusiasm drowning out his protest. Moments later, the sound of approaching sirens filled the square. Uniformed officers moved in, their presence commanding attention. Roberts was placed in handcuffs, his protest falling on deaf ears. Walker, seeing his plan crumble, slipped away into the chaos, but Alex knew this was only the beginning of their fight against him. As the officers led Roberts away, Alex stepped back to the microphone, his voice steady despite the whirlwind around him. "This isn't just about an invention," he said. "It's about what we stand for. Transparency, innovation, and a better future for everyone. My parents believed in that future. And so do I." The crowd roared in approval, their applause echoing through the square. Alex looked to Emma, Luke, and Richard, a wave of gratitude washing over him. They had done it. Not just for his parents, but for everyone who'd believed in a brighter tomorrow. As the crowd began to disperse, Alex stood by the Impala, his hand resting on its hood. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt the weight of his parents' legacy as a guiding light, not a burden. "Let's go home," he said quietly to his friends. Together, they climbed into the Impala, the engine purring to life as they drove into the night, ready to face whatever came next. The night was still, the sky a canvas of countless stars that seemed to watch over the old barn. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of hay and earth. Inside, the barn felt different now. No longer just a place of secrets and discoveries, but a sanctuary of transformation and purpose. The Impala rested at the center, its metallic surface reflecting the faint glow of a lantern that hung nearby. Alex stood beside it, his hand brushing the hood as if connecting with the car one last time. Behind him, Emma, Luke, and Richard gathered in a loose circle, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and quiet triumph. For a long moment, no one spoke. The events of the past few weeks weighed heavily on them all. The chase, the danger, the revelation of truths that had changed everything. Yet here, under the vast expanse of stars, there was a sense of peace, as though the universe itself was offering them a moment to breathe. Alex broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "I don't know how to thank you," he began, turning to face his friends. His eyes lingered on Emma and Luke, who had been with him every step of the way. "You didn't have to stick by me through all of this, but you did. I couldn't have done any of it without you." Emma smiled, stepping forward. "We're not just your friends, Alex. We're family. And family doesn't give up on each other." Luke grinned, his usual humor cutting through the somber mood. "Besides, I wasn't going to let you take all the glory. Someone had to make sure you didn't blow it." A soft laugh rippled through the group, lightening the tension. Alex turned to Richard, his expression softening. "And you? I didn't think I'd ever say this, but thanks for standing up for me. For once, you weren't the brother I grew up resenting." Richard chuckled, though there was a hint of regret in his voice. "Maybe I just finally figured out what Dad was trying to teach us. It's not about who's better. It's about what we can do when we stop fighting each other." Alex nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. "Dad would have been proud," he said quietly, "of both of us." The group fell silent again, the weight of Alex's words settling over them. He turned back to the Impala, his reflection distorted on its polished surface. Memories of his parents flooded his mind, their voices, their laughter, their unwavering dedication to something bigger than themselves. "I'm ready, Dad," Alex thought, his heart swelling with determination. "I'll make you proud." He stepped back, his gaze sweeping over the barn and the people who had become his family. "This isn't the end," he said firmly. "It's just the beginning. My parents dreamed of a better future, and now it's up to us to make it real." Emma nodded, her eyes shining. "We can do it. Together." Luke raised an imaginary glass, his grin infectious. "To the future, then, and to keeping this car out of the hands of anyone who doesn't deserve it." Even Richard smiled, the weight of their shared journey evident in his posture. "To the future," he echoed. As the night deepened, the group slowly began to disperse. Emma and Luke headed toward their car, their voices fading into the night as they joked about the next challenge. Richard lingered for a moment longer, giving Alex a small nod before leaving as well. Alone now, Alex looked up at the stars, their light steady and constant. The barn felt quieter, but not empty. It was filled with the echoes of everything they had endured, and the promise of everything yet to come. "I won't let you down," Alex whispered, his voice carried away by the gentle breeze. He placed a hand on the Impala one last time, feeling its silent strength. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was a part of him, a symbol of his parents' legacy and his own resolve. As he stepped out of the barn and into the cool night air, Alex felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in years. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face it. With his family, both old and new, by his side, he knew they could build something extraordinary. The stars shone brightly above as Alex walked toward the future, their light a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could always find a way to shine through. And as the barn door creaked shut behind him, the Impala stood quietly, a sentinel under the endless sky, waiting for its next journey.